Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is proud to say that once again, the presenting sponsor for Season 8 is Townsend Automotive in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. First off, thanks to so many of you listeners out there who not only decided to purchase a vehicle from this family-owned business in the last 2 years, but also shared with them that it was directly because of their support of this show. That's what community, even in our virtual format, is all about. Second, Townsend Automotive, celebrating 49 years serving West Alabama, has been extending its reach so that you don't even have to be in the Tuscaloosa area to purchase a car from them. Nationwide vehicle delivery service is available for Southern Fork listeners, and it's something that makes buying just the right new or certified pre-owned vehicle even easier. Visit townsendhonda.com for current inventory, or, of course, if you're in West Alabama, stop in. Townsend Automotive always salutes local entrepreneurs, from restaurateurs to podcasters, and they welcome you to be part of a community that does the same. This week's episode is a bit of a departure, but something very personal to me and essential to how I approach the varied work I do. I have been drawn to having deeper discussions about the nature of food and how we think about it. So I wanted to let you in a little to my behind the scenes by bringing this into the show once a quarter or so. Those of you who subscribe to the newsletter might find a somewhat familiar tone in these Southern Fork Sustenance episodes, which will be conversations with thought leaders that explore the deeper bedrock upon which the Southern Fork is built. Shane Mitchell, a writing mentor of mine as well as a colleague, is my first guest to walk us into this kind of conversation. She's the author of Far Afield, Rare Food Encounters from Around the World, editor-at-large at Saveur, a 6-time James Beard nominee for food writing with 3 wins, including the MFK Fisher Distinguished Writing Prize. And her work has appeared in everything from travel and leisure to serious eats, with a significant part of her most recent articles a series called Crop Cycles for the Bitter Southerner. Although she currently makes her home in New York State when not on the road, she has 325 years of deep family roots on Edisto Island, South Carolina. Welcome to the Southern Fork, Shane.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you for being here with me in person instead of on the phone or on the text. I really, really appreciate it. I'm excited to have a different kind of conversation with you. And listeners, I hope you're as interested in this as I am, but it is my show, so I'm going ahead regardless. I wanted to start this conversation today about being a food writer, because that was something that has been dismissed as women's work or less than or whatever. And I really struggled with accepting that for myself for a long time. And I think that my work improved vastly once I accepted it as my beat, my home, where I wanted to study. And you said that you had a similar thing.
Well, let's first stop calling ourselves food writers.
Perfect. Love it.
We are journalists, storytellers, authors. Let's own the big words. No, let's not sideline ourselves just because people think it's women's work to do all of that around food. Mm-hmm. It's really important because it gets under my skin. I've been so many types of writers over the course of my career. And it's too easy to slot yourself.
And then you actually stay in that slot. And you lose your creativity because you need to be able to look outside and go back in. You need an open doorway or an open window at least.
Well, when I've tried to explain some of my work, I've said food is the way in. It's the way to be invited to the table. I know authors who, when they want to start a conversation with someone, they start talking about soccer leagues. And one friend can get a conversation started by talking about what Manchester United is doing versus whatever soccer teams are out there. I'm thinking of the one from Italy. Anyway.
You're sitting across from the wrong gal.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's bring it more local. Mm-hmm. Clemson versus UGA.
Right.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
So, people can get a conversation started about that. But if I say to someone, what are you cooking tonight? There's a good chance I'm going to be eating whatever got cooked. Because they're like, come on, let me show you. Let me tell you how this dish became part of my family and, why it's important and why this ingredient is so elegant and, everything about it. And then other bigger conversations open up.
I spoke at Creative Mornings a few years ago and I talked about preserving community through asking about food. This exact moment. And I said I can get to a real conversation in 2 questions when it's food. Because if you say, what are you cooking tonight? And then your next question is, where'd you get that recipe? And then you have knowledge of that person beyond the facade.
Oh, absolutely.
And it goes from there. So it's a very intimate thing. When did you know that this was something that caught your imagination, your creative imagination? When did you realize that food was a way in for you creatively?
Okay, so a little bit of bigger background. My dad was an artist. My grandfather was an artist. My siblings are artists. They are all visual thinkers. The way I think is also visual, but it's with words. I'm the poet of the family. Mm-hmm. I paint with words. Mm-hmm. So I've been writing since I first sat at a typewriter in my dad's studio when I was 9 years old, and I haven't stopped since. And it wasn't until the early 90s that suddenly food started to be interesting to me as a topic, because I was doing a lot of research around history and culture, particularly here in the South. And for me, food was never not an essential element of that. So the way to start to discuss all that is, what are you having for dinner? And it was shortly after my mother died in 1989 that I realized that we had none of her recipes written down. She was just one of those people who threw stuff in a pot and it came out amazing.
Right.
So I started trying to reproduce those recipes, going back and forth with my siblings, all of whom supported themselves at one time or another, waiting tables or doing short order cooking.
Yeah, the capitalist artist life. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm.
But one of my siblings is a chef. He's a professional chef, CIA trained, Culinary Institute of America, CIA.
Yes, when we use the CIA on the Southern Fork, it means Culinary Institute of America.
Yes.
Hyde Park or...
Hyde Park.
Yeah.
Yes. And so...
Or San Antonio now or San Francisco. Right?
San Francisco. Is there one down here in South Carolina?
Not yet.
Oh, getting that mixed up. Well, so my brother is a chef. Still is. And we all got really competitive because he worked for Daniel Boulud and he did stages with Nobu and with a man named Grant Coons who had a restaurant called Le Pinasse in New York. And he was classically trained, did the whole like French high haute cuisine. And we all would gather at holidays and look at my brother's cooking and go, I can do that. You know, you grew up cooking the same stuff I did. So there's a little frisson of competition between the siblings because there were 5 of us. And so there was that. And then also the confluence of meeting an editor named Christopher Hersheimer, who was quite famous as a founder of Savour. And I had at the time started to like pitch stories to Gourmet. And I said, I know.
Rest in peace. We miss you.
I don't.
I do. Sorry.
That's all right.
We can decide to defer on that. Yeah.
The old Gourmet, I do miss. The latter, not so much. But I will say that I had tried to pitch Low Country foods to Gourmet and they were like, didn't get it at all. So Christopher, when I met her, and that's another long story, too long for now, I said, would you be interested? I think I can write about food. And she said, sure, why not? You know, give it a shot. Mm-hmm. And that started me starting to focus on food and the culture of food. And that's where I found the sweet spot of storytelling.
Yeah, the culture of food. And I'm on the plane a lot, right? I'm very happy that this work takes me on a plane, and I'm just very thrilled for that. However, I am so not thrilled to try to explain to anyone that asks me what I do. And I haven't gotten it down. And one of the things that they say, oh, you're a restaurant reviewer. And that's always the question. And I say, no, I write about people and place through the lens of food now. I used to be like, no, I kind of like write about the ingredients, you know, and like just ramble and think, oh God, this elevator speech is going badly. And they really don't. I'm just practicing, right? Because we have to define ourselves because our minds are just, you know, I'm walking down the street and I can think of 5 stories to write. And so it helps. But that definition and using food as storytelling, I'm going to ask you a question that a lot of people ask me. How do you know when it's a story? I get a feeling, and it's kind of obvious, but I have a somatic kind of thing. But what about you?
It's very amorphic thinking. I don't think linearly. So, you know, some people come up with ideas when they're in the shower or in the middle of the night, or when they're walking down the street, or they catch a whiff of something. For me, it's when the kicker pops into my head.
Oh, and explain for non-writers what the kicker is.
So the kicker is usually the last sentence in a narrative. It's what brings it all home. Mm-hmm. And if I can't think of the kicker, it's not a story. I have to go back and work harder to make it get to that sentence. Mm-hmm. And that's how I think
That's how you know.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm a nonlinear thinker as well. But you focused in the last few years on specific ingredients and something that I like to use in my own internal language as a cultural totem. So, and I remember reading your sugarcane story. It took me a while. I had to pause. It was long, Shane. Hey. I mean, like, I know people write novels and stuff, but that was like the focus needed to write that piece. But, I mean, it paid off in a few awards. So that was good. But the idea of a cultural totem, the idea that as our society shifts we still as humans really need touchstones and rituals.
Tell me what a cultural totem is for you.
Okay.
I'm going to switch it around to you.
So we need actually, so I can get into this by explaining a good example in the South. And that is a former sponsor of the Southern Fork, and that's Duke's mayonnaise. And so when I lived in Florida and back in the day we couldn't get Duke's, I had it shipped to me because I couldn't imagine not having Duke's. Once I found it, I have people that will tell me, don't look in my fridge because they're nervous that they don't have Duke's. And I'm like, it's okay. But there are tons of chefs with Duke's tattoos. I mean, we kind of signal to each other. It's like almost like a sports affiliation. You know, I'm Duke's, I'm Hellman's or something like that. But there is something beyond that. There's an affinity. There's actually, it's almost something kind of tribal. Like I am part of this group. This is who I am. I'm identifying as this. And people say, who cares? It's just mayonnaise. And that's always a dismissive comment because we're missing something hiding in plain sight. And my work is finding the stuff that's hiding in plain sight. I love that story. Does that make sense more of what a cultural totem is? And so I think of like somebody who can't wait for the first peach, but the first peach isn't just that sensory moment. It means spring. It means home. It means whatever, and being the peach princess, like we read from you last year. Last year?
Was Peach Queen last year? Yes, it was.
Peach Queen.
Gosh. Oh, no, it wasn't. No, that's 2 years ago
2
now.
years. And so that means more. That's a place, you know, like the Collard Festival or the Grits Festival is an anchor of place. And so that's what I mean when I'm talking about these cultural totems, Vidalia onion, or it means something to the people that gather around that. Yeah. And to me, that's what a totem is in a folklore discussion. And I'm a folklorist. So there you go. How do you feel about that? Do you agree with me? What do you...
Oh, yeah. So when I start to develop a narrative, I look at those cultural totems, and for me, they're crops, significant crops, that have enough narrative surrounding them that tells a larger story. So I'll pick a crop that, for the crop cycle series, I'll pick a crop that's larger than life. Last year, I wrote about Vidalia onions.
That's why I brought it up.
Yes. But it wasn't just a love note to an onion. What I was looking at, but I also loved collaborating with a photographer named Audra Melton, who is just as passionate about storytelling. What I was looking at was systemic abuse of labor around that particular crop because of a federal indictment. And it's shocking to think that an onion, which is so loved, became the cornerstone of this narrative about systemic abuse. And I had some hard decisions to make about my own family's personal involvement and proximity to that kind of narrative. And I had to decide, because originally onions weren't on my radar as part of the crop cycle. I was like, too niche.
Right.
You know, it's not like you can say.
It's not a huge commodity product until you look deeper. And it is.
It is. I mean, you can say in the South, tomato, and everybody will have an argument or a love affair with a particular type of tomato, or whether you put mayonnaise on your sandwich or you use squishy white bread or some artisanal stuff, but with the onion, it was an incredibly difficult narrative because I just thought, you know, a big deal. It's an onion, you know, until I discovered what was going on in the fields in South Georgia and realized this is too important a story not to add it to the crop cycle.
And you wouldn't have gotten there. You wouldn't have even looked in that spot, right?
No.
Without going, okay, I've given myself the fences of these crop cycles. Okay, so what's next? And let me look and let me start investigating what might be happening. Yeah. But on the other side of that, it gives us a way into joy too. Cherokee purple tomatoes.
Best ones.
Best ones for me. And I remember the first time, I mean, people tell you stories. Like we went, like when we met, like it's a meet cute moment. I remember the first time I saw a table of Cherokee purple tomatoes, and it was at the Greensboro Curb Market, the inside one, which is a great little farmer's market in Greensboro, North Carolina. And this older gentleman just had a table, and he had paper towels down and just all of the tomatoes that he had grown. And every week I was like, please be here again. Because I would have that. So there is a lot of joy, Duke's mayonnaise, and we play on that. How do you combat the flattening of the narrative of the stories that we like to tell with the culture that we work in to tell them?
I have to look for fresh ways of telling narratives. Because if I just wrote about, for instance, peaches, if I just wrote the same old stuff that everyone writes about how sweet and wonderful peaches are, there'd be no elevation to a cultural totem. So I have to think through what else is involved with peaches. And for instance, I was looking at the sexuality of peaches.
Yeah, it's an emoji that is quite used in that way.
Yes, it is.
Next to the eggplant.
Next to eggplant.
I'm not saying but anyway, yes, I know that exists.
But also the actual use of the peach as shorthand for she's a sexy girl, she's a peach, I want some of her, I'm going to eat some.
Juicy,
pink. Think of all those narratives. If you Google peach and girl, the shit that comes up on the internet, it goes really deep and ugly and dark real fast. And so I thought, okay, I actually want to talk to a girl who is a peach and see, what she thinks of this. And so that's where the narrative about the Peach Queen came in. And it turns out being a peach queen is no bundle of joy, but still she owned it. She, took that narrative and took it in different ways because she had been body shamed because she's a buxom young gal, and she now owns that narrative. And she said to me, I have paid for college through being a pageant girl. And so just that should make people zip it.
I love that line. Yeah. Make people zip it. Because she's using what she has to change her narrative.
Yes.
This is so fun. I should just do this all the time.
Yes, you should. Talk to more people.
So, I think I'm just using this to get all the advice that I need all the time to keep writing. It's really hard to do. And I think it's really hard from my perspective, and I want to hear your perspective. I need time to think. Like you're saying, I needed time to waffle around and think about this and click on Peach Girl on the internet. And we are pressured or invited to accept the pressure of being factories of content. I'm here at Charleston Wine and Food, and I am recording, and I have to put out a podcast, and I've chosen to engage in that. But I'm doing that as I am researching and wide open, letting things come into my world that I'm going to write about or consider in the next year. How do you make space for yourself to think?
Okay, so
Do you have rituals?
Yeah, I have rituals, but I'll say something that's a larger statement. Just bear in mind that publishing is a love affair that doesn't end well.
Yes.
And it's okay to fall out of love with publishing, but you don't have to fall out of love with writing. And the best writing is what you do for yourself. Not everybody's going to get it. Nobody's going to want all of your stuff. Nobody's going to read it all the way through.
Or even open it.
It took my husband 4 months before he read Onion. 4 months. And you know what he said at the end? To this difficult narrative that's one of the hardest things I've ever written. Well, that was nice.
You were like, I'm going to get in the car and drive for a bit.
The dog's in the back seat. I'll see you in a month.
Yeah. I think for me, it has been so great to defiantly take the time.
Time is very important.
No matter what, but we don't have the support. And, you come from a place where you can do what you do and take that time. And,
well, time is ticking. Time is ticking.
I know. It's still, well, and I think that is also good. I think it's also good to have a space. I'm a big believer in fences. I'm a big believer in deadlines. I work on that way. I need those, otherwise I'm just over here, noodling in 15 hours. I need that focus, because I am a nonlinear thinker as well. And all of this work with food, can you talk to us just a little bit about what you've learned about yourself or the world? And just, obviously you can't begin to cover that, but how accepting food and the work that you're doing has really taught you a way in.
It really was surprising to me that that's what resonated, given what I've written and how many other sort of spaces I've occupied as a journalist, to suddenly get traction by writing about grits. I mean, when my editor asked me, he said, why should we write about grits? We were talking about a 7,000 word essay about grits. He said, what hasn't been said about grits that I would assign you a piece that big? And I said, you don't get it. I hate grits. And he's like, oh, go, so.
We need allies like that too, though.
Yes, it's important. But I will say this, having allies is important. Having good editors are important. Having good editors who understand you and want to have a long relationship is very important. But it's also another voice in your head. And sometimes I have too many voices in my head. And I just have to say, fuck you all. I'm going off on my own. I'm doing this project that I want to do. And in the greater scheme of things, it may never see the light of day, but it gives me joy. And that's what I need. Because you can be so dragged down in this process. It's a very isolating, alone process. And quite frankly, I don't have community with other writers.
Right.
Because talking about writing is not doing writing.
Right. And you have to write to think about what you want, what you know. I don't know where this is going to go. I got to write it to find out. It's a creative process. Yes. Otherwise, if you knew, that's the hardest thing for me to explain. If you knew where it was going to go, you wouldn't have to write it. But it's just like painting a picture and you would discover something. And so it's so hard to accept pitches for me and to even explain what I'm working on, and I just don't anymore. And I mean, I also do things like this, and I do other stuff that is, explainable. But I have this little pocket where your life is bigger of this pocket. I have this pocket that I've carved, and that space is very holy to me. It's very holy. So,
well, I'll say
you
that
still have joy.
Cooking is a joy for me, a personal joy. So it's just, I consider it one of my artistic pursuits, is to be able to nail a pineapple upside down cake through the pandemic. I can't tell you how many pineapples I bought because it would last a long time, so I wouldn't have to go to the supermarket as many times. And so all those pineapples were sitting on the counter, and I thought, what am I going to do with all this? So I perfected my pineapple upside down cake.
Nice.
Am I going to get an award for that? No, but it tastes great. And that's where the joy of having those other pursuits creatively are so important. My father was my mentor. Dad was a hardcore ride or die, smoke them until you cough your lungs out kind of painter. And he was, I swear, oil paints killed him down. But he taught me to pursue vision, and he taught me to always own my own stuff. I own all my copyrights.
Wow.
To everything. I do not sign any contract that takes some of my creativity away. And that's something I really counsel other writers to do, is learn contract law. Understand that aspect of your creativity. Understand when an editor says, well, my publisher really doesn't allow us to, give you that. We don't have those kind of contracts. We don't have that kind of collaboration. I'm like, thanks. I'll go find somebody else.
Wow. Word of the day. And that's sign it all.
And Southern Fork is yours.
Southern Fork is mine. Yes, it is. Well, if people want to learn more about Shane Mitchell, I'm going to have a lot of links on the Southern Fork. But you can go there. You can see the face behind the voice if you like what you hear. I'm hoping to add nuanced conversations like this, just like you add salt and pepper during your cooking process, to my regularly scheduled interviews, which I can never say regularly online or on mic. And I appreciate you following along with me on this journey, and I appreciate you for agreeing to tandem jump with me today.
Let's pull the parachute stuff.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?